All right, welcome everybody again to the Disability Vote Coalition's final webinar before the election on November 5th. We call this one, Are You Ready for the Presidential Election? The Power of the Disability Vote. And I'm going to tell you why we named it that in just a minute. But just a quick overview about the coalition. We are a nonpartisan group, which means we don't lean Democrat, we don't lean Republican. Our goal is just to provide factual information to make sure that voters with disabilities are included in the process. So whether that's, how do you register to vote? How do you cast a vote? We spend a lot of time talking about your rights as a voter with a disability, accessing polling places. So that is our goal, to make sure that everybody can participate in the whole electoral process. We do not talk about specific candidates or anything like that. We are coordinated by the Disability Rights Wisconsin. I introduced Anna a few minutes ago, and the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities, which is the organization I'm with. And then, of course, as a coalition, we have lots of other community partners, agencies. We have individual members that are very passionate about voting and want to do whatever they can to participate. So we always welcome new members. You can just contact us and we can talk about what that looks like. So here is right off the bat why we chose to call this the power of the disability vote, because the one statistic in about the 7 years I've been doing this that still blows me away is that if people with disabilities voted at the same rate as people without disabilities, there would be almost 2 million more votes across the country. That is a lot of power in our disability vote that I think we significantly underestimate. So people sometimes, we've heard in the past that I don't think my vote matters, it's not a big deal. But when you really take in that statistic and think about how many people that is and how close elections have been, especially very recently, that's a number that could change pretty much any election anywhere. So your vote absolutely has power, and it is your voice. And that's a lot of what we do at the coalition is try to let people know how important it is to vote, and think about what are some of the barriers that might make that harder for you, so that we can work with you to make it possible for you to vote. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this webinar. We also have on here a few other points about why it's important to vote. So obviously elected officials, they're making policies, they're implementing laws that impact our daily lives, the things that are important to us. So it's really important that we think about who we're voting for, what are their values and views, and what are yours, and how well do they match up. We often hear that, I'm not too excited about any of the candidates, but there's usually enough of a difference that, you're never going to line up on every single issue. But who do you think is the most connected to the issues that are important to you? So making informed decisions and doing some background on candidates is also very important. Vote 411 is a really great website that just provides factual information. Again, it does not lean Democrat or Republican. It's just factual information about candidates. It's a really great place to go to learn what candidates think about different issues. Voting shows elected officials that we're out here paying attention. And in this case, I am talking about the disability community, that we are paying attention because they are making decisions about, in the state, what kind of services are you getting? Are services going to be cut? those things are very important to your day-to-day life. It may change the way an elected official votes on an issue. So if they hear voices of people with disabilities talking about their concerns, and they know that, their vote is open, they could vote for me, they could vote for someone else, that can have an impact on what they decide to do. And then I cannot have a webinar where I don't talk about how important local elections are, because we know the turnout at local elections is very, very low compared to more of the higher visibility ones like the presidential election every 4 years. But if you want to talk about people that make decisions about your daily life, that's the local officials. And that's things like, like a city council member, they're deciding what new businesses come in town, where a stoplight's going to go, housing. That's a big one for everybody right now. Oh, shoot. What kind of housing opportunities are going to be coming up in the future? Your trash pickup. Those are the kinds of things that we feel often right away, more so than some of the national things that might take a while for the true impact to hit you. And it can be a little bit harder to find information about local candidates, but usually they always have Facebook pages, websites, and local newspapers do a pretty good job of putting candidate information in there. So we really strongly encourage you to vote. Vote early, vote often, vote in every election. And then the most important one is it's a civic responsibility, and one that shouldn't be taken lightly. Not everyone has always had the opportunity to vote. So it's something that we shouldn't take for granted. All right. So we're going to start right off because we get this question a lot. Can I still vote if I have a guardianship? And honestly, it depends. So a person who has a guardian can retain the right to vote unless the court removed it. So if you have a guardian, that means you went before a judge and a judge made the decision about whether to grant a person guardianship or not. And in some cases, you can keep some rights, including the right to vote, the right to get a fishing license, to marry, to sign a lease. There's all different kinds of rights that a person may be able to retain. Ultimately, it's up to the judge, though. Some judges are kind of all or nothing. It's all rights or none. And then some are better about, if a family says, I do want them to still be able to vote and get a license, that they will honor that. So you really have to look. There is a form that you will get a determination and order on petition for guardianship due to incompetency. You should have gotten that. You can get it at your county clerk's office if you can't find it. On that form, there is a box that tells you if you retain the right to vote or not. It is possible that you could contact the municipal clerk and ask them, although those lists aren't necessarily completely up to date. So if you truly want to know, make sure you get the form. If that right was taken away, we have some great lawyers that worked really hard to put together a guide on how to get your voting right back if it was removed. It's like a step-by-step guide on how to do that. So if you want to work on that, you can go to the Disability Vote website with our resources and download it, or you can contact us and we'd be happy to send copies out for you. I'm not sure if you can hear my kitties in the background. So what's on the ballot? We're all getting inundated with commercials and mailings, and there's a lot more on the ballot than just the president. So we also have a U.S. Senate race. One of our senators, Tammy Baldwin, against Eric Hovde. Our U.S. House it's also referred to as the House of Representatives. Sometimes you will hear Congressperson. There are 8 of them in the state, and all 8 are on the ballot. Then in Wisconsin, we have state senators. There's 33 of them. Half of those are up for election this year. And then we have a state assembly. That is when you hear like representative, that is your assembly person as well. There's 99 of them, and they are all up for re-election. And you may remember there were new lines for maps. So it's going to look a lot different. I think we're going to see a lot of changeover. I already saw just in my district 2 longstanding representatives did not make it through the primary, so they will not be on the ballot. So I think we're going to see a lot of new faces, which is actually a really nice opportunity for us to go out and share our stories with our newly elected officials about what concerns us as people with disabilities. And then we have a constitutional amendment on the ballot again that is kind of confusing, as they all are written kind of that way. So we wanted to clarify what that constitutional amendment means so that you can make an informed decision. So we have our national constitution, but we also have our own state constitution. So we want to be sure that people understand that a change to a constitution is a big deal. It has to pass through our legislature in two sessions in a row, and then it needs to be approved by voters in a statewide election before you can change the Constitution. So we are now at the point where it's gone through 2 legislative sessions, it's gone through, and now the voters get to decide, do we want to change our state constitution? And this is what's on the ballot. So the question is, it is not in plain language. We all everybody gets, upset about how these are worded. It is what it is. But the question is worded: eligibility to vote. Shall Section 1 of Article 3 of the Constitution, which deals with suffrage, be amended to provide that only a United States citizen, age 18 or older, who resides in an election district may vote in an election for national, state, or local office or at a statewide or local referendum. So what you're voting on is this sentence is exactly the same except for one word. They want to change provide that every United States citizen to provide that only a United States citizen may vote in election. So what does if you voted yes, a yes vote means you want to change the Constitution and remove the guarantee that every U.S. citizen has a right to vote. The wording would then be changed to only U.S. citizen. If you vote no, it means you don't want the Constitution to change. You want it to stay as it is. And actually, somebody else gave me this tip as a way of thinking about it. Every is a more inclusive word. Only is a more exclusive word. It's leaving people out. So that's one way to think about it. And then also considering, is this how I want to change the Constitution? Or do I need to figure out more about what this means? So it's, again, we are nonpartisan. We will not tell you how to vote on this. But we do encourage you to find as much information as you can to make an informed vote on this as well. So some important registration deadlines, if you haven't registered already, You can't do it online or by mail anymore, but you could do it in person at your municipal clerk's office up until November 4th. And then in Wisconsin, we have same-day voter registration. So you can go to your polling place on November 5th and register, which is really nice. So it's not too late to register and vote in this election. There are different ways. Again, I mentioned the online and the mail are too late now, but in the future, the myvote.wi.gov website is amazing. You can do so much on that website, and it walks you through it really well, so it's fairly easy to understand. You do need a photo ID. I think the hardest part about some things on My Vote is figuring out how to take a picture of an ID and upload it to the website. That can be tricky for some people, but once you've gotten past that part, it is all very easy. You can mail in a completed registration form. Again, that deadline has passed for this election, and you can go in person. You'll need a proof of residence. That's something with your name and your address that proves where you live. A lot of people use like a utility bill. It could be a bank statement, a lease. It could be something from your university. If you go to a college, it might have something that you've gotten from the university directly to you to prove where you live. And I mentioned at the polling place on election day, you'll need to bring that proof of residence there too, and have your photo ID. So make sure you bring everything you need to the polling place that day. And then there's some voters who live in a care facility that may be able to register with a special voting deputy that comes to your care facility. And some of them are also appointed to register people. So that's a bit more nuanced for people who live in a residential facility, but it's another option. So thinking about how you will vote, we always ask voters through the Vote Coalition when we meet voters, what's your plan to vote? And a big part of that is, how will you vote? Are you going to go in person on election day? Are you going to request an absentee ballot, fill it out and mail it back? Or are you going to go early but in person? So those are our options in Wisconsin. Things to think about if you want to vote in person. I've always loved voting in person. I always took my kids since they were in child carriers because I wanted them to grow up knowing like this is what you do. It's your responsibility. And then COVID hit, and like many people, I did switch to the absentee ballot. It's really nice. It is convenient. Presidential elections are exciting, but there can be very long lines. So all things to consider, especially if you're a person with a disability, maybe you're compromised, you can still wear a mask to protect yourself, but maybe that's uncomfortable being in crowds or being able to wait in long lines, those kinds of things. But if you are voting in person, we really encourage you to check your polling place, make sure it is where you think it is, especially in bigger cities that have polling places all over. That's very easy to do on the My Vote website that we talked about. You just click it, put in your address, and it tells you exactly where to go. We strongly encourage you to preview your ballot again on the My Vote website. It's probably my favorite thing on that website. You click your ballot, click view my ballot, put in your address, and the same thing. You get exactly what your ballot's going to look like. And the great thing about that is I used to get caught off guard before I found this with some of the local elections or the local referendums, which are also really worded very difficult. So it's hard for you to know what you're actually voting on. That gave me time now to go figure out what candidate do I want to vote for? How do I vote on this referendum? Or maybe talk to people I trust. So I always check my ballot first. And then if there's a lot of things on there, I will actually write down my choices on a piece of paper, and you can take that with you to the polls, and it'll save you some time as well. Will you vote curbside? That is an option for people with disabilities. If you can't get into your polling place, they will send two election officials out to your car, and you vote from your car. We strongly encourage you to call ahead for that, because every location does it differently. Ideally, they would have a well-posted phone number that you can call. A lot of us have a cell phone now. That way you don't have to get out of your car. I use a wheelchair myself, so, if I need to unload my car and go in and find somebody, it kind of defeats the purpose of curbside voting. But sometimes there's a doorbell that you have to ring. And my favorite story is in a really small municipality. They're like, oh, you just pull up to the window and you wave and Bob will come out. So everybody does it differently. So save yourself a headache and call ahead. And again, we encourage you to call now. I mean, it's going to get more and more hectic for them. Try not to call on election day. Transportation is another huge barrier for people with disabilities. How are you going to get there? A lot of us can't just hop in a car and go whenever we want. Maybe we have to go with family and friends or a neighbor, or it's through an agency and there's only certain times that you can use their transportation. So you really have to plan your day around it. And then knowing your rights. We are going to talk about what those rights are, but we've heard too many stories from people with disabilities that didn't know their rights. Some of them ended up walking away without voting. So we want to be sure you understand your rights so that you can speak up for yourself. You can advocate if something isn't going the way it's supposed to. Do not forget to bring your photo ID. I did that once. I've never done it again because I had to go all the way back home and get it. And then if there are questions or problems that day you're going to vote, the best thing to do is to ask for the chief election inspector. Every single polling place has one on site, and that's one of the reasons they're there. So you ask to speak to them. If you're still not satisfied with the outcome, we encourage you to call our voter hotline, 844-347-8683. You can call that number anytime. In fact, it would be really helpful if you program that into your phone right now, because there's no way you're going to remember that on election day or when you really need us. So if you just program in that phone, you've got it at your fingertips. So you can always call there, and we can troubleshoot with you what to do next. And then there's voting absentee. More and more of us have experience with this now since COVID. But if you haven't requested the ballot yet, it's not too late, but I would do it today. You will most likely, you're going to get your ballot in time. But at this point, I would say if you get it in the mail and you vote it, I would consider finding a way to return that in person. And we do have drop boxes back again. You could stick it in a drop box. I would be very concerned at this point about trying to mail it back and get in it being there on time. We encourage you to follow the directions carefully. That's one of the things to consider with absentee voting is if you make a mistake, you're not there when they put it in the tabulator to know about it and fix it. So you need to be confident that you're voting your ballot the way you're supposed to and that you're following all the directions carefully. You can absolutely get help from anyone you want to fill out your ballot. They are not supposed to tell you how to vote, but if you need someone to read it to you or to fill in those tiny little circles, you can absolutely do that. It just can't be from an employer or your union rep. You will need a witness. The witness is only there to sign off that you voted that ballot, not that they see who you voted for. They can watch you across the room and not know who you voted for, but know that you voted that ballot. And then you can see in the picture that person needs to sign it, and they need to put their full address to make that ballot be able to count. So put, street address, city, state, zip. And it needs to be back to the polling place no later than 8 p.m. on election day. How do you get that ballot? Again, one of the easiest ways, if you can get past how to upload your photo ID, which you only have to do once on that website. Once you've done it once, it's in the system, and then you can go back in anytime after that and just click request. But you go to that link and it'll take you right there. There's only one election left in this year. But say you were at the beginning of the year, it would have a button like, I want an absentee ballot for the next election, for the entire year's election. So they'll just send it automatically. You make the request once. Or you can click very specific elections that you want the ballot for. There is an application that you could download from the Wisconsin Election Commission website. Fill that out and mail it back in with a copy of the photo ID. Again, it's getting a little late to do it that way. You can also send an email request to your clerk, where you'll also need to upload a copy of your photo ID. And then you can apply in person at your clerk's office. And I talked a little bit about what the witness of the ballot is supposed to do. Again, just making sure that you filled out the ballot and not somebody else. That's their main job. And then here are the deadlines. So you do technically have until October 31st to request the absentee ballot, but you need to think about the mail delivery and how long that may take. I'm not even sure why they have it that late, because I would be afraid I wouldn't even get the ballot by the election. You have until election day, 8 p.m., because that's when the polls close, to return the ballot. And then early voting began on Tuesday. So people can go to their municipal clerk's office and vote in person. It's like voting absentee, but you're doing it in person instead of at home and mailing it back. So a lot of people like doing it that way. The one thing to think about is every municipality can set their own hours for that. So you'll want to look that up or call. Lots of those places put it in the My Vote website, what their hours are. Some do not. And it will tell you the location and it will tell you the hours. I did notice, we looked some up at the self-determination conference this week. In Madison, there were Saturday and Sunday hours that were available in some locations. So sometimes that gives us more flexibility. So a little more about the in-person absentee voting, doing it at your municipal clerk's office. When you go and you ask for it, you do it right then and there. In fact, you're not allowed to leave that location with the ballot. You show your photo ID just like you would do in person on election day. And then you can either call your clerk or check the website for the times. It can't occur more than 2 weeks before election. And it lasts about, it goes through the Friday before the election. So, you will get this PowerPoint. It'll be on our website, and these are hyperlinks. So if you don't know your municipal clerk, and most of us don't feel bad, you can click that link, put in your address, and it will tell you your municipal clerk and email and phone number, so you can find that information. All right, so we have an awesome voter here, very passionate. Jordan, let's see if I can pin Jordan here. Jordan Anderson, ooh, there we go. There we go, you're up on top there, Jordan. So I've known Jordan for a long time. Voting is one of the things he's most passionate about of anything. So he agreed to come and talk about how he has chosen to vote as a person with a disability. And he's done it a couple ways. So And how are we going to vote this time, Jordan?
Hey Jenny, it's good to be here with you all today. So I'm actually gonna vote in person and on election day, but I have done it um several different ways, multiple times. So it's just very important for me to um have my vote counted on election day.
So why did you decide to do it in person this time?
Because I really like using the accessible voting machine, the express vote. I know many of you probably used it, but if you don't know, it actually reads you the ballot and actually fills in the circles um, for you as a person that struggles using their hands. It's a, a nice way, and your vote is private then.
Okay, so yeah, you were able to vote independently then when you used
Yes.
the voting machine.
Yes. I mean, I love doing absentee balloting, but I also love going to the polls to experience that aspect as well. Um, but who knows if it's a snowstorm? I may do that depending on the election and when it is.
And was it probably around COVID that you
Yeah.
started absentee voting?
Yeah, it was around COVID because it was much easier, and I didn't really and it was just easier to get it done and out of the way. But I kind of miss going in person, so that's why I did the going in person for this election coming up here.
And how did you decide who was going to help you vote? Because you said you can't fill in the circles yourself, so you did need assistance.
Yes. I mean, I use a lot of people, but I use kind of the ones that I know that have my same values and stuff like that.
Okay. Because that's just more comfortable
And more professional that way.
and more professional. Yeah. So some people will ask their parents. Some people have maybe a caregiver that helps them that they can ask. It can be a friend, family member. It really can be anybody. It just can't be, like I mentioned before, an employer or a union rep. But you want it to be somebody you trust. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that you can now have someone return your absentee ballot on your behalf if you have a disability. That wasn't always the case, so there's still a little bit of confusion about that, but you can. My husband does it for me because I just feel better delivering it in person than through the mail. And our municipal clerk is really good. She is just asked, are you returning this on behalf of a voter with a disability? And he says yes. And that's really all they're supposed to ask. You don't have to prove the person has a disability or say what kind of disability it is. So it should be a fairly simple thing if you have a disability to have somebody you trust return your ballot.
Jenny, does anybody before you go on, I just want to make sure that anybody, do they have any questions for me? Because I would be happy to answer them.
Yes, for sure. Anna, do you see? I see lots of chat things.
Sorry, I couldn't find my button. So yeah, I think we should kind of talk about, these questions are really good. So in the chat, Connie Kincaid, she said, check checking on Dropbox availability is helpful. And that's because there are many municipalities that have drop boxes and have chosen to have them. There are even more municipalities that have chosen not to have them this election cycle. So it is a good idea to call your clerk if you are not sure whether there's a drop box and you would like to vote that way. Dawn says the machine that you can use with your hands if you're able to, the accessible machine at the polls is, in my opinion, great. And like Jenny kind of said, and this is true of the accessible machines, is they will, if you double vote or vote twice for something, it'll tell you right away, and so you can go back and fix that. And that's really important, and I think it's good for everybody. And you can use that machine even if you don't consider yourself to have a disability. I use it because I think that people at the polls, it'd be good for more people to be aware that it's an option, but also because then it checks my ballot as I go. I don't want to make a mistake. And then Dawn also said, how do you verify somebody has a disability? And again, like you said, and like Dawn said, you don't have to.
That's important for people to know because there are clerks asking for more information than they are supposed to, or pushing that a little bit. So it's important for people to know that so that they can, again, advocate.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, thank you, Dawn. That's really helpful. She uses it because she doesn't have she has OCD, and sorry, I'm losing my mind here, but she has OCD, and so you can use that machine for a variety of reasons and disabilities, or if you don't have a disability. There's some polling locations in the state of Wisconsin that only use the accessible voting machine option. So, yeah, that's good. That's a good point too. A ballot, it's hard to feed the ballot. Wait. Oh, you can't put that ballot in the regular machine. That's right, because it's smaller. The ballot is smaller. There's something else I was going to mention. Oh, Allison wanted to know if BPDD sent out information on the candidates and their policies on disability-related issues in Wisconsin. I can say that we did not do that through the Disability Vote Coalition. And I certainly don't want to speak for BPDD. So.
Yeah, we do not do that for BPDD either because, again, it's nonpartisan. We want to provide people information about their rights and how to do things, but we don't want people to feel like we're swaying them to vote for one candidate over another. But what I will say is the Vote 411 website will compare like side-by-side comparisons of like, Trump Harris or Baldwin Hovde. So you can kind of see in different areas. Again, of course, disability doesn't often pop up as one of those, but it's still, looking at the other ones gives you a lot of information about kind of values and, do they want to cut Medicaid and Social Security and those kinds of things or not, or grow it, or so we try to give you resources for that information, but no, we would never like outright send not like we're picking one candidate over another, but we will tell you where to find the information, but we don't provide it directly.
And that's what's in the chat.
Oh, that's great. And then Connie said that was helpful to hear about Dawn's experience with the OCD and having residents with that concern. That's great.
Yeah, that is great. I never thought about that. That's helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions for Jordan? I think it's helpful, Jordan, that you have voted lots of different ways. And that you like the accessible voting machine, but that, it is sort of dependent on the situation. Like, yeah, nobody Nobody has fun going out in February if it's icy and
Yes.
cold outside, so it's nice to know there's the absentee option. All right, are you able to stay on a little bit? We're almost done, but
Yeah, I can stand.
okay, because we are going to get to the rights now, which are super important. So everybody has the right to vote privately and independently, and as Jordan said, that accessible voting machine makes that possible for him to do that. Otherwise, there's somebody marking the ballot and knowing who he's voting for. Every polling place is supposed to be accessible, but we know that that is not always true. Sometimes they're held in churches where maybe you can get in the front door of the church, but you can't get down the half flight of stairs to the basement where they actually hold the polling. So those things do happen. That is where curbside voting can be especially helpful. Everybody has the right to use the accessible voting machine. Every polling place is required by law to have at least one of those voting machines. So there are cases where that has not happened. Not very many. Fortunately, what we hear more often is that they are not set up. Poll workers maybe don't know how to use them. The ink is out. It's things like that. So they're supposed to be setting them up like they do with the rest of the polling place and testing it. But we always encourage anybody to use that machine, whether you have a disability or not, because the more people who use it, the more they're going to be sure that machine is ready because it is being used. And, that just makes every vote more anonymous because more and more people are using it. And best practice would be that all the poll workers vote on the machine. You can ask for an accommodation. So, I talked earlier about long lines for a presidential election. You can ask for a chair to sit in rather than having to stand in a line as a disability accommodation. A signature guide helps you. Everybody signs the poll book. Some people have electronic poll books now, but a signature guide helps you find your place better. Like people with low vision, it can be hard to do. Magnifying glass to read your ballot better. An assistant stating your name and address. Again, we hear stories about all these, but it used to be you had to state your own name and address, and there's lots of people who are not able to do that. And so there was a law change where it does still need to be said out loud, but no longer by the person. So if you can't speak it, the poll worker could do it easy enough, or it could be somebody with you that does it for you. But again, that's one a lot of people don't know. You have a right to assistance marking your ballot as long as it's not your employer or union representative. Here's a picture of the accessible voting machine to give you an idea of what it looks like. There are headphones to listen to it, which you don't need if you can read the ballot on your own. That's fine. There are like tactile buttons. So if you're low vision or blind, you can feel the directional arrows to move on to the next question. I even used one at our conference. We had one there, and what I didn't know is that some of them can hook up to a sip and puff wheelchair where you're kind of blowing and sucking air to move the chair. Some of these machines can hook up to a sip and puff to vote. I thought that was really cool. We talked a little bit about curbside voting already. More and more people are getting to know that. Hardly anybody knew that when we started talking about it. We encourage people to file a complaint. Lots of people are like, I don't want to be a complainer, but things will only change if people are aware of it. And it'll make it better for you next time, but it'll also make it better for a whole lot of other people. And so those complaints go through the Wisconsin Election Commission. They will follow up. And just try to improve things. So don't feel bad about making a complaint. It's helping a lot of people. A lot of people also don't know if you make a mistake on a ballot, you can turn it back to a poll worker and ask for another ballot. I think you can do that once. You can bring the note sheet. I talked about looking at my ballot and making my choices, and I would write it down on a piece of paper. You can absolutely bring that into the polling place. And most importantly, no one should tell you how to vote. Lots of us talk to people about, what do you think of this person? And I'm concerned about this. And we all do that. But at the end of the day, it's up to you. You have to make the decision. And it may not match people, loved ones. That can happen. But it's your vote. It's your power. And you don't want to give that power away. So being an informed voter, I would encourage you just to take a look at my vote, just play around with it a little bit. And then here's that Vote 411 website that I talked to you about, because it's really just that good. Ballotpedia is another place that shows you more national election. I mean, they don't go down to like the local level, but these big elections, you can get a ton of information about candidates. WisconsinVote.org is another one. And then for the Disability Vote Coalition, we have e-newsletters. We have lots of resources. So we encourage you to go to disabilityvote.org. You can sign up for our newsletter on our webpage. And then we have a very active Facebook page that gives out information and resources there as well. And then our voter hotline, I just want to, if you haven't done it yet, you can program that phone number into your phone. And then I talked a lot about municipal clerks. They're the ones that, kind of run the big show. They're in charge of that for each municipality. Municipality is essentially where you live. That's the direct link to find your municipal clerk. And then the Elections Commission, that is another place you can call if you have an issue on or before or after Election Day. Different places that you can go to reach them. And then we didn't get to go into lots of details about specifically how you register or IDs. In this one, we have in past webinars that you can find on our website, but bringit.wi.gov gives you all the information about what is an acceptable photo ID. You can get a free voter ID from the DMV. The biggest barrier there is, again, transportation to get there. So if you don't have a photo ID, you can get a free one for voting. And then there is a hotline if you need help getting that photo ID. And that's the end of the slideshow. We've already had really good questions. Anything else before we wrap up?
I'm going to just plug here, Jenny, the voter rights hotline that we talked about a couple times. I'm hoping that if you have any issues before or during or after that are voting related, if you have any concerns, you feel like your rights are being violated, anything like that, I implore you to contact our hotline. You'll likely talk to me. And we can hopefully get some things sorted out. But if we don't know what the issues are, we can't work on them to get better for the next election. So you're not a bother. In fact, I love talking to people. So please give me a buzz. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks, Jenny.
I do want to point out Dawn's thing that she put on there. You usually don't get it right away, but they print off a piece of paper at the DMV. When you go to have your picture taken, it will have your picture. It looks like a letter, but that can be used for voting. So if you're going like now before the election, you might not have the actual ID in time for the election, but you will get that piece of paper that allows you to vote. So thank you, Dawn, for pointing that out. So essentially, we want to leave you with, if you aren't registered or you don't have photo ID, it is not too late to jump in the game, and we are here to help you. So anywhere along the line, you can call that hotline. That is not just for election day. That's all year long. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We appreciate it, and we hope you have a great voting experience. Please tell all your friends and family, your vote is your power. So hope to see you at the polls.
Yay! Thank you, Jenny.
Bye, everybody.